Welcome into Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. It is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Payoff Pitch is presented by BetMGM. We're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. During the baseball season, please rate, review, and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Brendan Glasheen today, joined by Sean Zerillo and Anthony DeBundo for this particular episode. We have 17 games to get to, gents. 2 doubleheaders. Our first taste of doubleheaders on Payoff Pitch. We've got Guardians Tigers. First game starts at 1:10 Eastern, and then the Philadelphia Phillies and Chicago White Sox. They battle at 4 o'clock in the 4 o'clock hour, and then the 7 o'clock hour. So we have a 1 and a 4 and a 4 and a 7. So we'll discuss. We've got some angles, and I think it's some good analysis that Zerillo and DeBundo can offer when it comes to how to handicap doubleheaders in terms of monitoring lineups and just some factors to consider when it's a long day for the guys on the diamond. As we begin, we always get to best bets first. Zerillo, why don't you start us off? Best bet for this gigantic Tuesday slate.
Yeah, I'm going with the total. Usually I go with money lines for best bets. I'm going with the over between the Rockies and the Pirates at Coors Field in Colorado. We've got some great hitters weather today at Coors Field, temperatures in the 70s and wind blowing out to right field at about 17 miles an hour at first pitch. That's pretty dramatic for Coors Field. Now, I think people tend to think of Coors Field as this home run driven park. It's actually the gigantic outfield and all the singles that batters can rack up because outfielders aren't able to get to the balls as easily. So more base hits in Coors Field, even more this year without the defensive shift. And yes, with the wind blowing out, hopefully we just have more runners on base when the time those home runs or extra base hits into the gap and off that tall right field wall come. So the over 13 between the Rockies and the Pirates. I also like the first 5 over 7 to minus 120 as well. That number is still out there, but over 13 to minus 110 would be my best bet. Roughly where I would play to. We bet some over 12.5s and over 6.5s last night. As I said, the line has been moving up this morning, but still just at the end of my price targets.
Anything in particular on the pitching matchup as to why an over is on your side too?
Yeah, Jose Urena, Vince Velasquez both project back-end starters. Expected ERAs around 4.8 last season. ERA projections in my model around 5 for both guys. So replacement level starting pitchers with absolutely horrendous weather for them to pitch in at Coors Field. So definitely like the runs here. On a normal day at Coors Field would probably project this closer to 12.5. But I think today, with the wind and the weather, would have it closer to 13 and a quarter.
All right, very good. And the Pirates, they've been one of the better stories here early in the season. 14 runs in the game last night with their victory over Colorado. 8:40 Eastern start. DeBundo, best bet for you today.
Yeah, I gave out the the under in the San Diego Atlanta game last night. We got there very easily. I like the under again tonight, 7.5 this time. Spencer Strider going for the Braves. His stuff has looked as good as ever. He gave up a couple runs to the Reds in his last outing, but the stuff is still excellent. And he's even got a little third pitch he's been working on, a changeup, to kind of try to develop his arsenal a little bit beyond just the fastball and the slider, which are both elite. He got a ton of whiffs, a tons of swings and misses against the Reds. And he's countered by Blake Snell. Now, Snell's been pretty bad, and he's walked more batters. His zone rate is down by about 5%. So he's only been in the zone about 32% of his pitches. He's getting way fewer swings. But the difference now is he gets a very aggressive lineup in Atlanta, a team that's not afraid to chase, a team that will swing and miss. I just think that's a better stylistic matchup for him. It's also an Atlanta offense that's better generally against righties. I said this yesterday that they were the number 1 or number 2 offense against left-handed pitching in the first 2 weeks of the season, but it was driven by a 425 BABIP. Not really buying that. Snell's been terrible. Every metric will tell you that. I think you're getting a discount and an inflated total because of that. Whereas you'd normally see this around 7 with Snell. So I like the under 7.5, betting on Blake to have a bounce back. I know the pitch clock has bothered him a little bit too, but he is adept at getting out of those bases loaded jams with his stuff and kind of pitching around trouble. So I think he can manage that here with a free swinging Atlanta lineup.
Do you have any concerns about this? DeBundo, I asked you this yesterday. We were talking some futures. Zerillo, any concern right now with the Padres? I know you've had a lot of backing of this team and concerns strong. I realize that we're 18 days into the first month of the year, basically. But offensively, they haven't been very productive lately.
Yeah, so, I'm starting to come around a bit more with the way the Padres season has started, potentially taking a look at Fernando Tatis Jr. MVP odds for the moment he comes back, because if he ultimately is the spark that lights their season on fire, I think he's just going to get a lot of MVP consideration because of that. We see Acuna Jr. getting off to a great start, kind of pulling away in the race, but I think the storyline is setting up for Tatis to potentially come back and be the game-changing piece for the Padres. So just look at the narrative of that angle with Tatis coming back to potentially take over. I just don't know how much the steroid stuff is ultimately going to hurt him in the minds of voters. If it's close, I don't think he's going to get the nod. So interested, but there are extenuating circumstances why I would be, skeptical of betting on Tatis to win anything that people have to vote on. But in terms of overall Padres futures, their starting pitching is a little bit sketchy. Joe Musgrove not fully back in the mix yet. He's going to provide a boost to the team. So I am higher on the Diamondbacks than I was coming into the year. Maybe a little bit lower on the Padres. I bet the Diamondbacks to make the playoffs last week at plus 425. And I continue to think that the new rule set helps them as much as any team. So with myself being down on the Dodgers and the Padres relative to where I was coming into the year, yeah, I think the Diamondbacks to make the playoffs around wherever it is going to continue to be a value price.
Yeah, very good. And that's right. I mean, DeBundo, we talked about that yesterday, Anthony. Anthony was on the team total wins over the Arizona Diamondbacks, and we've talked about that a lot in the Payoff Pitch preseason episodes of stealing bases, speed,
and their pitching injuries. My biggest concern with betting their over was that I thought they were going to have to give Madison Bumgarner and Zach Davies the ball a lot. We will talk about Dre Jameson in a second, but he's replacing Zach Davies, and now Madison Bumgarner is hurt, and they're thinking about calling up a top 25 prospect in Brandon Pfaadt before his next start. So the Diamondbacks are forced to be the best version of the team that they could put on the field. They weren't intending to do it, but they are being forced to do it. So I think that just lends itself more, to them having a good season. Just, it's an ownership group that is probably not willing to spend to add to the team. So even if they're in the wild card hunt come July, I'm not really sure what they're willing to put, into the trade pool to add to this roster. But the roster they have currently is not only extremely fun, but also very talented.
Two public sides today on this big slate. We've got the Rays and Reds. The people like the Rays. Money coming in at 98% of the dollars, 81% of the bets for the Rays to beat the Reds today. But the other side we want to talk about, the other public side, the Yankees taking on the Angels. 86% of the bets, 93% of the dollars coming in on New York against LA. Angels just got out of Boston. Now they play the Yankees. Zerillo, any interest in fading the public and taking LA?
No, I think I'm going to be on the public or with the public in both sides on these matchups. The Rays first 5, I made minus 115. It's currently sitting minus 110. If that dropped to minus 105, I would bet Taj Bradley. Very high on Taj Bradley. Tons of arm talent. The Rays are just absolutely loaded with prospects, with pitching. It's part of the reason why I think the Rays are very dangerous come playoff time, especially once they have Springs back for the end of the year, Glasnow back for the end of the year. The Rays are incredibly loaded, and that pitching is going to be a chore to get past in the American League. So as the Rays start to dip, lost to the Reds yesterday, Springs getting hurt, you give it another month here, maybe the rest of the AL East catches up to them. Maybe we have some room to bet more Rays futures. In terms of the Yankees matchup, though, the line did move out of my price range. I liked the Yankees up to minus 134. I bet on Hayden Wesneski yesterday. I thought we were getting a discount on his first 5 line, and I kind of feel the same way about Clark Schmidt today, or at least I did, where the prices opened after a rough start to the season for a guy who I was high on, a guy who projection models are high on, view both Hayden and Clark Schmidt as around 3.5, 3.75 ERA type guys. Both struggled to start the year, and I think we got discounts on them in their 3rd or 4th start. So I like Clark Schmidt in this matchup, but I also like the fact that the Yankees had an off day. The Angels are coming off not only the long series in Boston, but also a long rain delay yesterday where they sat around, didn't get into New York probably as early as they were expecting to. So not a long trip going from Boston to New York, but they also didn't get probably to dinner at the time they expected, or, to bed at the time they expected. Like, it's these little 1% factors that add up that I can't necessarily quantify, but I already show a projection edge on the Yankees. And I know the Yankees have also been sitting at home, resting for a day, got a normal night of sleep, all of the things that you would want. So Yankees clearer value side where it was. Don't really like it past -134 though.
Bundo, either of those games, Rays, Reds, Yankees, Angels, a thought on taking the AL East public sides?
Yeah, I mean, if you like good young pitchers, tune in to Rays Reds tonight. I certainly will have that game on a screen. Taj Bradley registered third best stuff plus in AAA, his first start, behind Simeon Wood Richardson and Kyle Harrison, and then came to and made his MLB debut, gave up a couple runs, but the strikeouts were impressive. The fastball looks really good on Bradley. And then, of course, everybody knows Nick Lodolo at this point, striking out an absurd number of batters. Rays can platoon him pretty heavily, though, and I think that's the biggest thing here. They can load up with righties. That's pretty significant given Lodolo's splits. No play for me in that game. Would lean toward the under generally, just based on the quality of the pitchers, especially in the first five. With that being said, the next game, I still like the Yankees up to -150. I'm okay with it. The reason is the split advantage. And I said this on last week's show when we talked about Tanner Houck. I think it was Friday. And we were discussing who is the most split dependent starting pitcher in baseball. And I said Houck was arguably that, and that he had a pretty favorable matchup with Boston with the Angels because of it, because they don't really have many lefties in their lineup outside of Ohtani. It's really just Ohtani, Jake Lamb, and Luis Rengifo. Well, Clark Schmidt is up there with the same problem against lefties. He struggled against Baltimore's lefties in his last outing. His career OPS allowed against lefties is .954. His career OPS allowed against righties is .575. So if you're considering, whether it's Dinger Tuesday or maybe looking into some props as well, could target some Angels lefties. But I do think the Yankees match up well here, especially with the bullpen rest advantage. The Yankees bullpen not only didn't pitch yesterday, but had Sunday off too, because Cole threw a complete game shutout. So it's 2 days of no pitching for their bullpen. They're going to be ready to go. Schmidt hasn't gone very deep in games, so they will have their A bullpen behind him. So I like the Yankees.
Okay, moving on to our favorite underdogs of the day. The Arizona Diamondbacks were a team we just discussed in the best bet segment when DeBundo took Braves Padres under. Arizona, a dog again at St. Louis. Zerillo, you're on the Snakes.
Yeah, happy Dre Jameson Day to everybody if you celebrate. We don't talk about athleticism a lot for pitchers. It's not something that is as apparent, but when you are 6 feet tall and can throw a fastball 99 miles an hour, you are clearly a good athlete because all of that power is generated from your lower half. I've talked about the fact that Dre Jameson on a team with the fastest guys in baseball could beat many of them in a sprint. He had 80 grade sprint speed in college. So again, that explosiveness, that power is coming from his lower half. He has a dominant fastball slider combination. Both are elite offerings. He needs to figure out a third pitch. Either his curveball or his changeup needs to bring one of those up a level if he wants to be a full-time starter. But in terms of getting through a lineup once, throwing 3 or 4 dominant innings, he can be extremely effective. And the Diamondbacks had intended to use him in that type of fireman role this year, where Zach Davies or Madison Bumgarner gets in trouble early in one of their starts. They bring him in as the piggyback to basically shut it down and keep the game close for 3 or 4 innings. So injuries force their hands, force them to put Jameson in the rotation. I'm curious to see how he continues to develop and whether he figures out a third pitch, but he already projects as a very effective pitcher for me on a per inning basis. And in this matchup with Jordan Montgomery, even though I give the Cardinals a slight pitching advantage, both for the first 5 innings in the full game behind Montgomery and their bullpen, I still like the Diamondbacks here in this matchup because of their speed and defense. They actually project better in terms of speed and defense than the Cardinals do. The Cardinals surprisingly have fallen off a bit defensively in my models, defensively in terms of how they're racking up defensive runs saved. We'll see if that flips before the end of the year because they do seem like they should be one of the best defensive teams. But the Diamondbacks have overtaken them in those areas, in my opinion. So the Diamondbacks down to about +140 is my favorite underdog bet for today. And as I mentioned, I still think they're a solid bet to make the playoffs, particularly with the NL Central struggling. The Central might only get 1 team out of it. So I would expect 2 teams from the West, 2 teams from the East, and probably 1 team from the Central.
First 5 line for that game today. Cardinals are -165. Diamondbacks come in at +135, but you're just betting the full game.
Yeah, just the full game here. The first 5 line aligned with my expectations. I think it is a difference probably in how I evaluate the Diamondbacks bullpen, the improvements that I see there relative to last season, and then also just over the full game, the speed and difference differential. But the first 5 line, I projected at plus 135, and it's sitting at plus 140. So I'd need probably plus 145, closer to plus 150 to play Arizona there.
So off of Zerillo's point about the NL Central having a rough middling start for most of those. I mean, the Pirates are having a great start to the year, right? For their standards.
Wish O'Neill was there. They'd be really exciting.
Yeah. And of course, the Brewers have slightly overachieved based on where they were projected preseason. But Dabundo, I want to work your thoughts in here on the Cardinals, who are facing the Diamondbacks. You were on the D-backs yesterday, correct?
Yep.
But
we got the over in late somehow. That was a miracle.
And then last night in the Action app, you logged that you are on the Cardinals to win the Central at 7-10, 5 games out. Explain yourself.
Yeah, I read a really concerning article that really swayed my opinion on Brandon Woodruff's injury, and I think the Brewers pitching is going to have major problems holding up over the course of 162. Now, originally Woodruff was just shoulder inflammation, no problem, going to miss a start, just needs more time to recover. Now it's Woodruff saying that if this injury had happened in June or July, he probably would shut it down for the season, which is incredibly alarming for him to say. He's had some minor injury problems. He had Reyno's last year. Like, it's been a weird couple of years for Brandon Woodruff. When he's on the mound, he's a top 15 pitcher for my money, but he isn't going to be on the mound for the next couple months. And Corbin Burns, the injury appears minor, but he did have a pectoral strain, left his start early last night. He's also in a situation where he could walk this year. So if the Brewers do start to slide, they're going to have to really evaluate their long-term prospects with how much I think starting pitching is going to be valued at the deadline. I think more than ever, given all the injuries we've seen early in the season and given how the pitch clock could grind down these pitchers more. So I think Burns might be the most coveted guy at the deadline, not named Ohtani if Ohtani is not moving or if Ohtani's moving. So I think, there's a chance for the Brewers if they start to slide, they get the young guys moving in, that the division's wide open. And Sean mentioned the Cubs off air, and I see the case for them, but I'm going to trust the Cardinals and the offense that I still believe in. Nootbaar's had a slow start because he got hurt, but Donovan's taking a step forward. Burleson looks like he's taking a step forward. They're not quite getting the same production from their pitching staff, and that's certainly a concern without a doubt. But Liberatore is sitting there, and I think he's really got his velo up in the minors. Flaherty is starting to turn it around, I think, to being a mid-level starter. Yeah. And, we talk about Jordan Montgomery. Montgomery was pretty consistent, like a 3.5, 3.7 ERA guy in Yankee Stadium. Well, he's been throwing a sinker now since coming to St. Louis, and he had a 3.1 ERA second half of last year, which was backed with a 3.08 xERA, and now this year, 2.29 FIP, 3.12 xERA, and 2.45 ERA the first couple starts. Playing with that defense in a better park has really elevated Jordan Montgomery, and I think it's a good enough rotation with their offense to get by. They just need to survive this early stretch when everybody's falling apart on the mound.
And you mentioned those encouraging signs for Montgomery. We both like Drake Jamison, and we're both on the under in that game as well. I'm on the Diamondbacks money line, but we both like the under 8.5 there too, right? Right, Anthony?
Yeah, it's down to 8 now. I still like it.
On the subject of the Cubs, I remember one of my favorite lines from the preseason episodes we did, our division previews. Like, if this Cubs team, if this was like 2017, 2018, with some of the names on this roster, you'd be like, it's pretty good bunch here. It feels very... BJ and I are Red Sox guys. It feels very 2013 Red Sox-esque as far as how they, Elmer's glued this team together as far as their offense and their lineup. So,
the Cubs, if you look at the projection models, Fangraphs says that the Cubs are the value team right now. They have them at 11% to win the division. So there's some 11 to 1s that would be plus 800 implied. There's some 11 to 1s, 12 to 1s out there on the Cubs. They're pitching solid. Their lineup is solid. They play good defense. If they add some bullpen pieces, they could be dangerous. And this division is wide open. So you could talk me into the Cubs right now. I was on the Cardinals preseason. I don't see the value there currently. I still think the Cardinals will win the division, but I think the value is on the Cubs.
Dabundo, we wanted to dive into some future angles there. Dabundo's got an underdog play. And by the way, our underdogs both hit yesterday. You and BJ, you were on the Mets last night, and that was kind of a roller coaster midway through, but
for sure.
the Mets got there.
Pittsburgh was not a roller coaster, so good call from BJ. That was about the easiest win you'll get all year. My underdog is the Kansas City Royals. I don't love a ton of the underdogs on the board, so it's a pretty short plus 106 underdog. It barely even fits the criteria that we use, the plus money underdogs. But Brad Keller has really figured some things out. And it's funny, I joked off show, he's back. And then I realized, well, he was never actually good until now. So I guess this is really his breakout party, but it's all backed up by the data. I mean, it's a rise and stuff plus for him. It's a new sweeper that he's been throwing that's getting a ton of break and getting a ton of whiffs. His curveballs looked really good. The fastball velocity is up. Everything about Brad Keller, I picked him up in a fantasy league yesterday. Like, I'm riding this train here. And what we know about Nate Eovaldi, I generally like him more too. He's always had a home run problem. The wind is out to right today, so that is a little concerning because I also bet the under last night at 9. But I like the improvements that Keller's made, and I think the market's just slow to pick up on him. So I'm going to take the Royals at home. They've lost 4 in a row. I was joking earlier, I have won one bet of like 6 on the Royals this year, but I don't think they should be an underdog at home given Keller's improvements, and I think they're very sticky.
I just want to echo Anthony's thoughts because I like the Royals here too. Keller went to driveline this offseason, changed the slider to a sweeper, added a curveball, throwing the curveball a ton, and he's having a lot of success with it. Pitch models like both pitches as well, view them as above average pitches. He's also 27 years old, and he's been in the big leagues for 6 seasons. This guy came up at 22. That's a lot of experience. So to finally see him break out, make these improvements is pretty cool because he's in the prime of his career right now. So yeah, I'm buying on Brad Keller, both halves. I also like Nathan Eovaldi though, and I really wanted to bet an under here. The wind is blowing out of Kaufman today, so I am in alignment with the total at 9. I really wanted to bet the under here. I just can't. But yeah, Kansas City in both halves down to plus 105, I think is fine. I like Nathan Eovaldi too. Otherwise, I'd be heavier here. But yeah, big improvements from Brad Keller. And again, it actually like surprised me that he's 27. I would have thought he was 30, probably blind. Would have thought he came up at 24, 25, and he's now 30. So he's 27 in his prime.
Makes you think it's less of like just like veteran has randomly good season and more so guy in prime finds things to break out and becomes good pitcher. I'm more inclined to believe it's about
like being tired of the status quo, realizing he needed to change something, physically went to drive line and then physically like changed 2 of his pitches. So this isn't randomness. This is like actual intention.
I think the he went to drive line is going to be the new he went to Jared.
Yeah.
Also,
it's the new best shape of his life.
Yes, exactly. He went to drive line. Now he's going to throw 105 this year now.
Interesting.
But I mean,
another one here in baseball.
The effects are tangible. Like it's not bullshit. These guys come out with new pitches and they dominate. So there's reason to believe. There's honestly no reason to doubt that this is like an actual improvement.
This is a darker thought, but it's like when they say when a guy gets hurt, oh, he went and saw Dr. James Andrews. Going to the best guy out there.
Never good.
Now,
also, the Royals have a new pitching coach.
Getting a second opinion with Dr. James Andrews is
never good. The Royals have a new pitching coach, Brian Sweeney, and the changes we saw with Bubic before he got hurt. Keller, Brady Singer, he got roughed up the other day, but like they've had real improvements in their starting pitching, which could be the beginning of something interesting in Kansas City, but they still look pretty terrible. The bullpen remains awful.
All right, final bets for the day. And as I mentioned off the top, we've got 2 double headers. So there are some games that are going, well, one game for sure. Detroit and Cleveland starts at 1. Hunter Gaddis, Matthew Boyd, the pitching matchup at 110. So we'll mix that in here. Hopefully, if you're listening, you can get a pick in before or get a play in beforehand. But just Zerlo, I'll go to you first on this. And I know you've got some other plays later in the day too, but just kind of if you could work in some of your thought process on how you look at the doubleheader thing throughout the course of a season.
Yeah. So by the time you're listening to the podcast, we should know the lineups for game 1 of Tigers,
Guardians
of Tigers Guardians. I'm sorry, with Hunter Gaddis facing Matthew Boyd. The Guardians we've talked about in the past struggle versus lefties. They have improved that this season. But I just project Boyd as a significantly better pitcher than Gaddis. Gaddis is one of the lowest modeled starting pitchers that has taken the ball multiple times this season for any team. So the Tigers in the first 5 innings to about plus 105, plus 100 is a bet for me in game 1. Typically, we do see starting caliber players sit in the afternoon game, or these starting caliber catchers sit in the afternoon game, which lends itself to an under more so in those games. You also are more likely to get the bullpens involved, or you have the possibility that bullpens get involved in game 1, leading to the key relievers being tired for game 2. So that leads me to White Sox and Phillies, where I like the Phillies in the first 5 for game 1 to about minus 120. I think that's moved out of range, but for game 2, I like both the White Sox first 5 and the over. Now, if I like the under, if I had a slight lean to the under in game 2 of a doubleheader, I'd probably lay off, because you don't know necessarily which relievers are going to get used in game 1, which starters are going to miss game 1, playing game 2, etc. But if I see value on an over in game 2, and as Anthony mentioned off air, JT Realmuto more likely to sit in game 2 than game 1. So there's a chance that the Phillies pitchers may not benefit from his pitch framing, his defensive abilities in game 2. But on top of that, the bullpen's more likely to get used up in game 1 as well. So slight value on the over for me now at 8.5 minus 110. White Sox Phillies game 2, but I also like the White Sox on the first 5 line there as well. Even though I'm not a fan of Lucas Giolito, the White Sox in their better split against lefties versus Bailey Falter. It's the White Sox in game 2 on the first 5 line to minus 137, in addition to the over 8.5. And then 3 other games on the board. I bet the Marlins in both halves, first 5 in full game, about minus 107, first 5, minus 110 full game. Edward Cabrera, one of these young pitchers who is in deep trouble, 1 inning of every start, where he loads the bases and you're sweating out every pitch because he can't find the zone. But when he does have his command for the remainder of those starts, and generally when he's not facing the Mets, he's a pretty good pitcher. So Edward Cabrera, first 5 full game. The Royals first 5 full game, Anthony and I mentioned. And then lastly, the Oakland A's at plus 160. They're an embarrassment, probably the worst team in baseball. But coming off of a blowout loss, I think we're getting slight value on the A's here, plus 160. You can bet them down to about plus 155. Ken Waldichuk, a pitcher Anthony and I have liked in the past. Maybe a bit lower on him now, but I just think where the line is, the fact that the A's are trending so poorly, it's probably a team we're going to have to bet on more than we want to. Hopefully they find a hot streak and we make some money off them now.
There they are, the A's. They're this year's Pirates, maybe this year's Nats.
Yeah, oh, big time. They're the Diamondbacks of 2 years ago, the Pirates of last year, very much. I would imagine the rest of the way, the A's are going to be the team who pops up most from a value standpoint, because they have almost nothing to get excited about.
I will say there's one thing that's very exciting right now about the Oakland A's. This is my campaign that I'm beginning. Esteury Ruiz has a 140 WRC plus. He's batting .321 with a 406 on base, and he's already stolen 4 bags. I mean, with every other American League rookie stumbling, it's Esteury time.
A's 17.
I mean, come on. He's putting up elite numbers for a shit team. You got to feel bad for him. Rookie of the year.
He's going to get all the playing time. I mean, all the
he's playing every day.
Opportunities, everything. So
he's going to pop like 5 homers and we're set.
17 games in, minus 72 run differential. They've lost 5 in a row. The Oakland A's,
it's real bad.
3-14. All right, Tabundo, a couple more you want to give out before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on almost every bet that I have, but I did just add some Dodgers first 5. Clayton Kershaw against Tyler McGill. Split advantage for both offenses. Dodgers better against righties. Mets worse against lefties. McGill has really ridden some matchups with some bad offenses, the Marlins mostly, and his stuff is way down from the McGill we saw last year. xERA up. So I'm concerned about McGill here. Love the Dodgers first 5, laying a little bit of juice, minus 160. Hopefully Max Muncy can crank some more homers because he might officially be back.
I lean that way as well. I have it at minus 170. I'm just waiting to see if it goes down, but I might throw that in a parlay or something. I agree with that, Lee.
Maybe
and then it is Dinger Tuesday, so I have some picks.
Yep.
Jordan Alvarez plus 330 against the corpse of Chris Bassett. He's officially on Washed Watch. His stuff is way down. Vinny Pasquantino, we talked about the wind blowing out. We talked about Nate Eovaldi's home run problem. Pasquantino's plus 550. I think that's just too high for a hitter as good as Vinny, who's got over a 900 OPS now. Gleyber Torres plus 420. against Jose Suarez, lefty for the Angels. You're never going to get a good enough price really on Judge, the big right, the judges of the world. But I do like Glaber. And then some potential interesting long shots based on just improved barrel rates / hitting the ball in the air more. Ke'Bryan Hayes has raised his launch angle from about 5.8 on average to about 14 degrees. That is a noticeable thing. He's lifting the ball more. That is usually a sign of power. We talked about the positive hitting environment. There's going to be a bunch of homers and cores. I don't hate a flyer on Ke'Bryan Hayes to potentially hit a homer. Ryan McMahon also good there. Improved his exit velocity this offseason. He's been hitting better. So those are the potential cores flyers if you're looking to get involved in that game.
Yeah, I like the lefties in the Coors game just with the way the wind's blowing. It's 16 out to right field. So I'd target the lefty hitters, Sawinski, Ji-Hwan Bae. You mentioned McMahon. Yeah, I would definitely go with the lefties the way the wind's blowing.
Okay, we started the show talking Rockies over, and we closed the show with Rockies Pirates kind of over with home runs. That would certainly
What an
help.
exciting game.
Come on, Zerillo. Pirates are hot. Pirates are a good story right now.
Yes, they are.
And a beautiful day.
I just wish O'Neill wasn't hurt. Like, they'd be so much more exciting if O'Neill Cruz wasn't hurt, because they're legitimately not bad and they're fun to watch. But
and the division's open, as you.
He was there. All respect to Brian Reynolds, who's one of my favorite players. I saw the way that team was looking at O'Neill during the first week, and he was their star. They were all looking at him like he was the star. So give him 4 months to come back. Maybe the Pirates are still in the hunt. Maybe they make a wild card run. I doubt it, but you can hope.
I also am extremely doubting it. So long as they're rolling out Vince and Rich 2 out of every 5 days, it's going to be very difficult.
If you guys remember, though, they were the most popular win total over bet in the preseason. So anybody who bet that over off to a great start. And I'm curious what I missed about this Pirates team, because I bet them throughout the year last year and I didn't see the over coming into the year. But clearly, we've bet on them. We've won money on a game-to-game basis, but didn't see.
Keller's been really good. Contreras has been solid. And the bullpen.
Yeah. And I like the bullpen. I mentioned their pieces.
And of course, Reynolds
year,
had a ridiculous couple weeks.
All right, fellas. That's it. Sean Zerillo, Anthony Dabbundo. Find them in the Action Network app. If Dabbundo has any more Dinger Tuesday plays, you can find them. But check out the app for any late additions to the betting card for this Tuesday slate. We're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday during the season. Thanks for tuning in to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. We are presented by BetMGM. For Zerillo, Dabbundo, Brendan Glasheen, we will talk to you all again on Friday. See you later.